the land of Lorcone, there was but one hope for the survival of the people, that which was beyond the firmament of the heavens. All knew of what the prophecy foretold. Liquid fire poured forth from the goblet of unending malice, like a thorn. Yet to the cobblers, butchermen, husbandmen, hoopers, alchemists, and magi alike, this doom was but forlorn and estranged to them. For these were the patricians of Lorcone, and all believed upon them was the calamity to fall the most heavily to their woe. Yet those of the lower class were joyous of this, for they believed the calamity to be their salvation. The destruction of their betters was their greatest hope, and they worshipped the goblet of unending malice like a god. A gruff voice shattered the crisp morning air. His strands of creamy beard hair waved in the breeze, his ornery face wrinkled.
Hearken. The gods hath ordained this land to be the bosom of righteousness, the threshold of destruction, and the kettle of pious lecturing. Woe to the architects of all footwear, kilderkins, and the talismans, the slayers of that which grows, and those who would pervert the natural.
So said Morak, priest of the Bao Moran, wielder of the Staff of Terror, and master of the dragons, self-proclaimed bringer of the calamity to be, he who was to endure. Morak's back creaked as he hunched over and unfastened his sandals to hold them high above his head, and with a look of solitude, he groaned.
If only I could manipulate the foolish countrymen of Larkon, like I can you, my facetious and malevolent thongs, and so deceptive in all of your simplicities.
Grunting, Morak cast his raised sandals into the sky, watching as they burst into a cacophony of blaring hues. Then he cried, and those hues came down to him and transported him unto the city of Jamkamkar, where he then raised his voice with the power of an earthquake and called down judgment.
There is within the boundaries of this city a dragon!
Hui, the Hooper, saw far off in the distance the gathering of clouds, and felt a rumble in the earth.
It has begun, I deem. The catastrophe of our time and the prophecy laid bare, fulfilled or no.
Cacanation burgeoned in precipitative expansion.
Another one of your four-spoken falsities, who?
Yet before there came an answer, the clouds came to Jamkamkar, whither Hui was speaking. And from the city center a blast came in the manner of a voice, and Hui was knocked to the ground along with half the city buildings. The sound of screaming women and children filled the air as the light from the sun was choked out mercilessly. And the booming voice continued. Through the turmoil and confusion, Hui got up and ran for the castle of True Hope. And to his joy, he saw beside him the other patricians of Lorcone. Dread lengthened their strides so that it seemed their feet were winged. They were not. In the distance, the castle of True Hope's gates burst open, and out strode a woman in a shimmering blue dress. She bore in her hand the Staff of Hope, for she was the Lady of Hope, and in her hand she held the power to vanquish Morak, yet only at the cost of that which was most dear to her. the darkness that was engulfing the city. With eyes crossed and fingers clenched, she shouted into the storm.
Behold, the castle of True Hope has stood for 10 years unconquered, and not by the thongs of your feet, nor the worms of your court shall it fall now. O Morik, the blasphemous!
Morak sneered towards the raven-haired woman.
By what claim to supremacy would you gainsay the priest of the Balmoran, most vindictive of Gwilmakin?
She raised the staff of hope towards the fell priest, the golden head of the staff glimmering with an internal light, and spoke.
By the blessing of Uma, I can sacrifice the life of my beloved in order to defeat any evil. Though it is called a blessing, it is a curse.
6 days and 5 nights until my return.
In a flash of glittering sparks, Morak disappeared. What the Lady of Hope thought to herself.
Yet how may I sacrifice my beloved? If he is bound in the dragon's tower, who
Queried the Lady of Hope.
shall join me in following the dragon's little scroll, which I hold in my own hand, and rescuing the fair Sir Balaric?
Hui felt something stir in his chest. Whether it was the fair face of the lady, or surge of courage brought on by fate, he could not determine the cause. He spoke.
Lady, I shall join thee. Let me call upon my men to aid us. For the Balmoran people shall no doubt seek to stop us. They have been awaiting this day for many years.
A man of red skin also stood and approached the Lady of Hope.
My name is Gum, and I'm a cobbler, and I want to join you on this immaculate quest.
The Hooper gave a look of derision, but with compassion welling in her violet eyes, the Lady of Hope proclaimed,
Come, baritone of Jamakamakar, you are welcome, and thrice welcome.
Gum's face split with a smile that revealed few teeth, and Hui puffed his chest in pride. Then they departed the Castle of Hope. They gathered men of Hui, and they went towards the massive tower which rose above the city. Miles of broken city lay between them, occupied by the Balmoran of Morak. After hours of gruesome battle with the ruffians of the Balmoran, the heroes finally approached the cast iron gates of the Dragon's Tower.
How do we enter?
Asked Gum, picking some leftover gruel from under his single molar.
Can you not read the riddle? The dream of my dream is a ream of your ream.
Seems so simple, yet it boggles and muddles my already befuddled brain.
The Lady of Hope looked exasperatedly at Hui, then pointed the staff of hope at the door and spoke. The door exploded inward, and they entered. There was no time for being chastised by an arrogant scroll of riddles. So into the darkness of the tower they crept, awaiting the onslaught that would inevitably enslave them. Yet ever the darkness seemed to elude them, and the Lady of Hope was perplexed that perhaps the dragon was not at home, and she thought,
How will we open Sir Valor's cage if we cannot use the dragon's tooth as a key?
Indeed.
whispered a rasping voice from the black parchment in the lady's hand.
From the maw of the drink, the latch shall be opened, the key you shall take.
Well, that's not very helpful. You miserable pieces of paper. She just told us we need a dragon's tooth, and he be nowhere to be found.
Then a booming voice thundered in the darkness.
Welcome, Lady of Hope. Have you come for him whom you snared so long ago? Your beautiful Sir Balaric.
Then he laughed uproariously. Suddenly, a gigantic black hand crashed through the floor and grasped Gum by his waist, shaking him vigorously in the air.
What's going on?
Stuttered Gum as he was shaken senseless. Before the final syllable left Gum's flapping lips, Hui clutched at his Cooper's hammer and raised it to smite the vicious creature's hand. But before that terrible blow fell, the hand retracted, pulling Gum into the elusive blackness. Hui fell to his knees beside the hole, a voiceless scream of agony upon his lips. He sat there for but a minute before the lady settled beside him. She laid her hand upon his shoulder.
I am sorry, Hui.
Then she shoved him down the hole and jumped after him to slay the dragon. For 3 days they fell, until at last they reached the belly of the tower. And there before them stood a truly horrific sight. There, Gum sat in a pool of blood, a gash in his neck and left arm missing. Yet in his right, he held the dragon's tooth key. The dragon's corpse lay slain behind him.
I am sorry, my lady. I will not be able to continue on.
He raised the key to his lips and kissed it tenderly before placing it in the hand of the Lady of Hope. The lady grasped his hand and kissed it gently, causing a pang of jealousy to leap into Hui's soul.
Blessed are you, Gum, amongst cobblers.
Then the lady turned to Hui.
Come, my dear friend. This way to Sir Valeric's cage.
They went then to a heavy door and inserted the key. The door opened, and a shining man was revealed. His nose was like chiseled marble. His brow was like a cresting hill. His beard of gold flowed like rapids that were rough, but not too rough. He wore a flowing white robe that came down to his upper knees, that shone like torches. Sir Valeric's teeth glinted white as he began to speak.
Most honeymoons don't end with a dragon unslain. The groom locked in the tower, and a bride off to rule a city, eh, darling?
You know why I had to do it, my love? The fate of our romance cannot be measured against the doom of my entire kingdom. There was no choice.
She turned to Hui and pulled him into a kiss, her tongue dancing over his lips. Valeric screamed in rage and seized Hui by the neck, raised him off the ground, and stabbed him through the stomach with his fist.
You whore spawn of demon wenches!
The Lady of Hope in turn swung her staff and with a deafening zap struck down Valeric with the fury of 1,000 suns. Sir Valeric was sundered from navel to nose, but with his dying breath spluttered.
But your love was mine by right.
Quickly, the Lady of Hope gathered up the various parts of her husband and her lover, and strode for the pit from whence they had fallen. She looked at the beautiful face of Valeric for but a moment, and then tossed his pitiful parts into the pit with a relieved sigh. Then she chanted, and both she and Hui began to ascend upwards, and light was ahead of them. They flew for days until they came forth from the pinnacle of the tower, and into a brilliant light brighter than the sun. They broke free from the shackles of the tower, and the clouds were cast back, and the people cheered like a roar of 1,000 thunderbolts. But as the crowd cheered, An ominous laugh filled the black clouds that came to cover the city. Then, like a pillar of doom, came down to earth.
6 days have I recessed, but now I have come to claim my own, to grapple the thongs of all of your dead bodies.
Speaking no word, the Lady of Hope raised the head of Hui in her left hand, and with her right she lifted the dragon's riddle scroll to her lips and bit upon it, before craning her neck and brushing her lips across those of the dying Hooper. Hui's eyes snapped open, and light flashed from them, and his body began to tremble terribly.
Our days together have been the best of my life, my lady. Please do not forget that when I've died.
Then she let him fall at the approach of Morak and the Staff of Terror. A choice befell the Lady of Hope. Should she sacrifice her beloved and save the city? Or should she fly off with Hui and live ever after in happiness? Then Morak's plight was laid bare before him, and from the bowels of his soul he remembered the prophecy. And from his waistcoat he pulled the goblet of unending malice.
Alas, the goblet has been filled with liquid fire, and upon my command, it will pour out like a thorn.
But
Declared the Lady of Hope.
upon whom shall it pour? You. If only I make the choice.
The Lady of Hope stooped, and lifting Hui, she leapt up to Morak and pressed the goblet between them. Then Gum appeared and spoke.
Hello, my lady.
He grinned. Then he drew forth a sword and severed Hui's head from his neck.
Know now that I am a servant of Morak, and have been planted from the beginning.
Darkness swept through the city like a flood. Crashes of lightning filled the sky, and above all else, the laughter of Morak.
Behold! The prophecy has come to fruition, and victory shall be mine!
There's a third choice, one which I would not consider even in the deepest parts of my being. To take the goblet's wrath upon my own head. And perhaps it is fitting. None have I given my love to in this life, more than to myself.
Morak's face filled with fear, and the lady, with exceeding strength, drew the goblet from Morak's hand, and grabbing him about the throat, she pulled him to her bosom and poured the liquid fire over them. A flash of light exploded from the liquid fire, and the people fell down to the ground in fright. After a time, they stood up and looked about. The tower was toppled, and there was no sign of the lady or Morak. The people fell upon Gum and roasted him alive upon a spit, and then fed his body to wild pigs. The people also lifted up Hui's body and set him into a tomb. Thereafter, peace came upon the land, and the people flourished, and they lived happily ever after. The end.
As a boy, I never thought it that I'd fall next to you. We're holding tight together, and I think I love you. I thought I knew beauty, but that thought just weren't true. Now I see my future story, and it's where I love you. Don't you tell me you don't feel the same way. I can see in your soul, I bless the hands that shove me down this hole. I wonder if you knew me, 'cause I ain't got no clue. It don't matter 'cause I do know